Here's something about quilting that I have used. Sometimes people say, oh, Marie writes books about quilting. I don't. You can't actually write a book about quilting. That is called a pattern book. I don't write those. But quilting is just this amazing metaphor, because if you think about it, what is a quilt? Well, it's just a bunch of scraps, and they're all different and they're all funny sizes. And what I as a quilter have to do is like put those scraps together in a way that not only makes sense, but hopefully turns out to be beautiful and expressive and useful. Now think about life, right? In the broadest sense, all of us are handed kind of a bunch of scraps, and we have to piece all these little strengths, weaknesses, gifts, birth order, wealth, lack of, education, into a life that makes sense and that hopefully is expressive and beautiful and useful. So that is something that I go back to over and over again in those books for that reason. Evelyn, everybody loves Evelyn, and she is the one who owns the quilt shop. And Evelyn is, people often think I am Evelyn, and I am not. Evelyn is who I would be if I were nicer and kinder and more grounded. And Evelyn is who I would aspire to be. She is the most adult part of myself. But she is, she's strong, but she also has vulnerabilities. But she is a terrific character to write. For me personally, I tend to enjoy the more difficult. I love a good curmudgeon. Let's get down to that. So in the series, my good curmudgeon is Abigail, Abigail Burgess Wynn. She is the 6th wealthiest woman in Connecticut, and she is incredibly confident. In fact, and it was very interesting when she came to me, and this doesn't always happen that characters come to me this way, but I heard her in my head, and the first sentence she said to me was, "People like me." And I was like, really? Tell me more. And that ended up being her first line in the series. And in fact, people do like Evelyn a lot. But the thing is, Abigail, people do like Abigail a lot. But Abigail is not someone who's very forthcoming about herself. She really does not like to talk about herself, but the reason people like her so much is she is very good about getting other people to talk about themselves. And so she tends to deflect personal questions with questions about them, which draws her away from places that feel uncomfortable. So loved writing her very, very much. Gosh, some of the other characters. Margot is a character who is actually, I don't usually base characters on real people, but Margot is a character who is based on a friend of mine named Pam. And when I met Pam, she was things that didn't go together in my head. She was incredibly nice. I mean, so sweet all the time. I kept waiting for that to like mask to crack and to reveal the unkind person underneath, and it never happened. The woman, if she told a lie, her tongue would have snapped off in her mouth. And she was consistently kind and nice and sweet. At the same time, she was also a very smart business person. Those two things did not go together in my mind. And so I wanted to write this character that kind of inhabited this dichotomy, and she was a lot of fun to write too. All of them are fun to write, but those are some 3 in that series that I especially loved. Esme Cahill fails spectacularly. We do have this really wonderful, rich cast of super interesting characters. What I love about this is it allows me to examine the full breadth of human experience in a lot of ways. But it also lets me bring in some humor, which I think is really important. Esme is dealing with some really very serious things, some grief, job loss, a very uncertain future. And yet at the same time, even in its most terrible moments, life can be kind of funny. And so there is that. So as Esme comes home, feeling like a spectacular failure, she's kind of coming home to regroup. She had left uh, her grandparents' lakeside lodge near Asheville, North Carolina, when she was about 19, because she wanted to be, a best-selling author. And Esme is a girl who has a plan, right? She's really somebody who loves a good spreadsheet, an agenda, and a to-do list. I admit I am this girl. I love a good spreadsheet. So anyway, she's just sure if she works hard enough, she'll make it happen. Well, life throws curveballs our way, and it certainly does to Esme. So after an unintentional insult to a really annoying and arrogant male author, she loses her job. She's doesn't have her house anymore. She's divorced, and she just doesn't know where to go. So she goes back home to regroup, but everything takes a really unexpected turn because suddenly she's forced to confront some of the really fraught relationships in her life, especially with her ex-con mother, Robin, who is somebody Esme has been avoiding. She also finds that her dear and darling beloved grandfather, George, who is he's a great guy, he's a raconteur, he's an innkeeper everybody loves, is possibly sliding into dementia, and as is, the lodge where they live. So she's got a lot on her plate. But while she is trying to deal with all this, Esme uncovers a hidden story about her grandmother that is connected to real life events. And she realizes that her grandmother was actually, though she knew her grandmother created some really unusual quilts, her grandmother was actually a really gifted but secretive fiber artist who never got her due. So as Esme sort of pulls on that thread, suddenly we are finding a story within the story. And that story within the story will help Esme to kind of see parallels in her own struggles as an artist. And it helps her and hopefully the readers look at the possibilities and purpose of failure in a new light.